This is House Planning Help episode 244. Hello there, I'm Ben Adam Smith, and this is the podcast for you if you're interested in self-build, because I'm exploring what houses we should be building in the 21st century and trying to break down the major roadblocks that may get in our way. Coming up in this session, my guest is Jenna Spesard from Tiny House Giant Journey. We're going to be talking about how you know whether tiny house living is right for you. There's a question. I wanted to do a quick mention for an event going on at the National Self-Build and Renovation Centre. I was actually part of the very first one that they did last year, but I'm pleased to say it was so successful that it's coming back again. Unfortunately, this time it clashes with my dad's 80th birthday, so it's a bit of a no-brainer. Dad, I'm coming to celebrate your birthday, so sad to miss out on this event though. What it does is gives you a complete overview of the Passive House Standard, which we know is something that delivers comfortable, healthy and energy efficient homes. But what does that actually mean? So it starts with just the basic level and then digs into some of the detail. It's got the who's who of passive house peeps in the UK, architect Alan Budden, Jay Cottrell down there, Chris Herring from the Green Building Store, John Palmer from Inhabit, and the list goes on. That was first time round. The structure may have changed slightly, as I mentioned, for this one, but pleased to see that they're doubling up the event. So it'll be back at the end of the year and I hope to join in on that one. So go to the National Self-Build and Renovation Centre's website and take a look. What I always enjoy is that, let's say the date has gone past, when an event gets into the cycle, it will go round and round. So hopefully you haven't missed it. It's just how soon it will be on next. So we'll put that into the show notes as well. Let's get to our featured interview. It's Jenna Spesard from Tiny House Giant Journey, and she's been sharing quite a lot of living in her tiny house and also traveling. That's another thing that she loves, which I love. I certainly haven't done that with kids for a few years, but she's got an incredibly successful YouTube channel, and I think it's time for us to have a chat. I started by asking how this all began.
Back in 2013, I was living like an average mid-20s American girl would, I suppose. I was in Los Angeles. I was living in a big apartment with lots of things. I was living paycheck to paycheck, basically, and I didn't see any light at the end of the tunnel that I was going to be able to purchase a home. So I came across the tiny house movement. There was some article in Times Magazine, I believe, and I thought, wow, that looks really interesting. And I've always been really interested in travel as well. But the downsizing part wasn't really something I had ever considered, and how it could free up my finances and sort of change my life. So I decided one day, probably when I've had enough of work, that I would just do that. So I decided to build a tiny house and travel with it for 1 year and try to see if I could start a blog or write about my experiences and share my experiences. And that's what I did. So it took me a year to build the tiny house. And somewhere along that line, I quit my job and started the blog. And then I spent a year traveling with it in 2014 and 2015. Yeah.
Couple of questions. First of all, as a traveler, you're much better sometimes not having any baggage with you as such, just a rucksack. So did you ever think of doing it that way, or was this important that you had to have your own home as well?
Well, I have done that. I've been backpacking around Europe and Australia, and at that point, now I've gone to like 30, 35 countries backpacking, and so I had that experience already. But for me, I think I was also searching for home. I knew Los Angeles wasn't going to be it, and I needed something a little bit more stable. And being someone who travels abroad so often, I didn't need a big home, and I realized that. So downsizing to a tiny house, and one on wheels in particular that could travel with me, seemed like the perfect opportunity, the perfect match for me.
You've made it sound very simple as well, but there've got to be costs involved. There's got to be a little bit of risk. What about the land it's on, or is that the point that that land changes?
Well, yes, there are some costs, of course, involved, but it's more like the cost of a vehicle rather than the cost of the average home, because the average home in the United States, at least, is, hundreds of thousands of dollars. And I spent about $30,000 building my tiny house and materials. Obviously, I did the work, so I didn't have to pay anyone for labor, but and that's it, So it's just an expensive vehicle, but it's one that you can live in comfortably, like a small cabin on wheels. And it's not so simple, I guess, as I've made it sound, because it was difficult learning how to build. I didn't have any experience, and it was difficult towing a 10,000-pound tiny house around the country and trying to find places to park other than campgrounds, which can be expensive.
I'm just going to say, technically, I have just built a house. I haven't actually done it myself. You've actually done it. So what skills did you need? Were you following plans? How did it all happen?
So yeah, I bought some plans. There's a company called Tumbleweed Tiny Homes. Now there's a bunch of different tiny house companies here in the US, but at the time that was pretty much the only one selling plans and trailers. So I bought the trailer, which is like the foundation of the house, and I bought the plans, and I went to a workshop. And then I just went for it, and I had plenty of help. Trust me, I didn't do it all on my own. I had friends and family members, and my boyfriend at the time did a lot of it. And so there was a lot of work that went into it, and a lot of learning. But I definitely had help from a lot of different people.
And what did you want from your house? I've seen you make hundreds of videos about people's tiny homes, but what did you want from yours?
Well, I say this often. I think that a lot of people have the wrong idea about what a house should do for them. In my experience, I see most people working for their homes. They are working paycheck to paycheck. Their mortgage is, more than 40% of their income. And what I wanted for my house was it to work for me. I didn't want to be a slave to my house. I wanted it to work for me in whatever fashion that might mean, in whatever city I decided to plant myself in. And I really wanted it to be a tool for my life, to better my life, and instead of something hindering my life.
What does that turn into then?
So my house is basically a small cabin on wheels. It's 165 square feet. Sorry, I don't know that in meters, if you'd like it in metric, but
that is so funny, because I've just done another interview where we had exactly the same. It was going the other way around. I was doing the square meters and couldn't get it into feet, but yeah. We'll roll.
Okay. It's very small is the point. It's about the size of a lot of people's entryways into their homes or their master bathrooms even. So it's got a tiny bathroom with a little composting toilet and a shower that's very small, only big enough to stand in. It's got a lofted bedroom. I can sit up in bed. That's about it. It's got a little multi-purpose area that's a tiny couch that turns into a guest bed or a dining room area, and a tiny kitchenette with a 3-burner stove, a little sink, a tiny fridge, and that's about it.
So how much was it personalized, or was it those initial plans that basically this is the one that you've chosen and you'll be living like that?
Oh, it's extremely personalized, in my opinion. I mean, the framing was mostly to plan, but any of the interior walls are not structural, so I could move them anywhere I wanted, and so I did. And I really did customize the interior. I think there's probably been dozens and dozens of houses built off of that same plan now, and none of them look the same.
Yeah, and you're very good at, I don't know how you've made as many films as you have about your house, so I feel like I know it fairly well. But when it's going out on the road, there's no risk of things falling apart. I mean, that seems a strange side of things, that something timber frame can just go on the back of your trailer, or it's on the trailer already, and away you go.
Well, there definitely are some risks, and the plans are engineered basically for earthquakes and hurricanes and everything else. I mean, these tiny houses, if you will, they're attached to the trailer in so many ways that they basically can't be parted. I've seen tiny houses that have fallen down a hill, in an accident, and they're still connected to the trailer. There might be other damages, but they don't fall off the trailer, and that's because of all the over-engineering that went into the plans. Everything's glued and screwed and strapped. So.
And how warm and toasty are they? This is obviously, I think about this a lot. We're a podcast about ecological homes. And although I haven't gone for something this small myself, I can see the logic of everything. Everything scales down. And I often think of this is the most sustainable way to live. Would you agree with me on that?
Well, I don't know. There are many, many ways to live sustainably. And I'm certain traveling is not one of them.
Yes, good
But,
point. Mm.
but if you were to set the tiny house down and not move it, I think it's a very, very sustainable way to live. And I haven't been moving my tiny house hardly at all since 2015. So now it's been very sustainable.
And are you living in it part-time, did I hear?
I am. So about a year ago, I moved out of the house, my tiny house. I became from a full-time tiny house dweller to a part-time tiny house dweller now. Now I live in I like to say, a mansion with my boyfriend. It's 500 square feet, so about 2.5 times the size of my tiny house.
Okay, but how did this go? How was the conversation here? How much was you? How much was him? Because he knows that if he's coming into this, that you're probably still going to want to keep it this way. So how was that all ironed out, or did you want more space too?
No, the main reason, not the main reason, but our first initial traction, I think, was because he already had this home, this 500 square foot home. And so we both had something in common, which was minimalism and trying to live within our means and not needing the big house with 5 bedrooms and 2-car garage and all that. So that's where we connected. And why did we decide on living in his house instead of mine? Well, it is a little bit bigger, so that's more manageable in some ways, but also location. His house is in Seattle, in the city, and it's pretty difficult to find parking for the tiny house in the city, and this is where he works. So it just made more sense to move into his home rather than mine. And when the time came to move in together. And so my house is now our vacation home that we spend time in, and it's only about an hour away on a little island off the coast of Washington. So it's quite nice.
Oh, sounds very nice. So one aspect of this then is that as you have more people with these tiny homes, you almost need different things. I can totally understand if it was just me going into a tiny space, I think I would quite enjoy that. But what are the limitations of a tiny house as things expand, as you get a boyfriend, as you think about a family?
Yeah, I mean, tiny homes, when they're built, are sort of personalized for the person that is using them at the time. And so when you bring other people into it, it can be difficult. And it's not like you can add on a bedroom. The trailer is a certain size and that's it. So it can be difficult. You can rearrange, and people have done it for sure. I wouldn't want to say that there are limitations too much, because there are definitely people out there living in tiny homes with children. It's really personal whether you think you can do it or not. And for me in particular, I think it would have been difficult to have children in my tiny house because of how I built it and the way I designed it. Now, could I do it in another small home? Absolutely. And I will, I think, one day. But that one in particular, I think I'd need to rearrange quite a bit in order to fit other people in there.
I think you get some great videos. If you try to do the tiny house thing with the kids, just trust me, they will wreck it. They will love it. They will be climbing on things and all the rest of it.
And I might go insane.
Quite possibly.
Yeah.
But it's obviously something that it sounds like you adapted to it very quickly. I mean, I know it's a few years ago now, but someone looking to do this, is it just making the jump and then that's it? You adapt very quickly?
I think humans do adapt very quickly, and I think I can say that even from my travels abroad with a backpack. You might put yourself out of your comfort zone, but within a few days you feel comfortable all of a sudden because you've gotten used to it. And I think it's the same with a different home, but I will say if it's not designed in a way that works for you, it won't be easy to adapt. So it's really important to design the house and to spend the time designing it so that it works and is personalized for your life and your lifestyle. Otherwise, it's going to be really difficult for you to transition into a small space.
Did you have any niggles with yours when you first moved in, and were they things that you could change, or just now you got to live with it?
What's niggles?
Oh, is that a UK word? Did you have any problems or any things that you hadn't foreseen? We always find these words when we do interviews.
I was sort of giving you a little hard time just because
that's all right. I like a hard time sometimes.
No, I don't think I did have any problems or niggles. I was just ready by the time I moved in because it took me a year to build it and I was not expecting it to take that long to build a tiny house. So I was antsy to move in some ways and excited. And so I had to give up some things that I missed, though. Like at the time, I was learning how to play piano. I had been in piano lessons for a couple years, and I just couldn't figure out a way to fit a piano in my tiny house. So that was sort of sad. But other than that, yeah, not too much.
You must find yourself going out of the house a bit more. Is that right? Or just you're reading a book in there? But, you'd think that the small space, you don't have the possessions, so you're not going to be probably watching loads of TV or anything like that. It's just pretty basic. So you've got to get out.
Right. There's a couple things about a tiny house that sort of open your mind to stuff like that, about living outside of your home. One is if you don't, you're probably going to get what we call cabin fever, which is just antsy and bored and miserable.
Have you had that?
In some ways. Oh, yes, definitely. Yeah. On days when I'm snowed in, which has happened, and I can't really leave or go too far, I can't drive anywhere, then I very much so get cabin fever, especially because it's just me and my dog. But also what it made me realize is that as a community, we don't really rely on each other anymore. We feel like we have to have all of our own space and our own things, and it's really put up dividers between us. So, for instance, just doing laundry, like most people here have their own washer and dryer. They don't need to go to the laundromat. But if you live in a tiny house, most likely you're going to a laundromat. Or a lot of people will have a home gym, or at least some weights or workout area. There's nowhere to work out in a tiny house. So if you wanted to go do some exercise, you need to go to the gym or get outside. So just realizing those few things that you need to do more often when living in a small space, it sort of makes you realize I'm more social now because I have to be out of my house. I have to go to the grocery store 2 or 3 times a week rather than once a month. Yes.
All these things that you don't think about. So are there any other possessions that were important to get into the house? There are obviously lots that you have to leave behind. You've got to rationalize your wardrobe, probably loads of things I'm not even thinking about. But what is essential to come with you into the house?
Well, that's very personal to the person. I don't have that much. I mean, I need my computer to work from home. It's a little laptop. I liked having a snowboard and some sort of musical instrument. So I went from a piano down to a ukulele, much more manageable in size. And then a few wardrobe items. But other than that, there's not a whole lot of things, actual possessions that I needed. More appliances, that I need to live a day-to-day, like kitchen appliances and things like that. But as far as possessions, there's not too much. I mean, I'm not connected to that many things. A lot of it's online nowadays, photographs and whatnot. So I don't need to have photo albums, and books I can have on my Kindle. So I don't need to have a bunch of books either. So really, as far as tangible possessions, there aren't too many.
And I got the impression, I did watch one of the videos of you doing a recipe, which I'm sure isn't your day-to-day, but you cooked something up in your tiny house. So what do you do normally? It just didn't seem, either you were a sort of noodles girl or cornflakes or something like that. How do you live normally? Because that looked like a bit too much, like a full-on once a month thing.
That was fun just for a video. But yeah, I mean, I make food like I live. I suppose it's simple, a meat or a protein and a veggie. And so it's, it takes me 20 minutes and I can do it all in one pan. And I think I'm an okay cook, but I'm definitely not a chef, or I don't spend hours cooking. And I don't even have an oven in my tiny house because I don't like to bake. So I do pretty much everything on the stove.
And what are the downsides then? We've talked about the big upside of finances, getting everything on track, and for better or for worse, being able to move around is quite exciting too.
Oh, downsides. Well, of course, there's downsides to everything. Having people over can be difficult because there's just not enough space. I don't have enough dishes. Explaining the oddities of my house, like the composting toilet, can be difficult.
That's quite an interesting one to have in a tiny house. Is it not? Or is it a good thing?
No.
I don't know, because I'm just thinking when I've been in sort of mobile home type things before, there've been the chemical toilets. So maybe it is good to get away from that. But when you're compost toilet, you've got to throw sawdust down there and you've got to get rid of it all at the end, haven't you?
Yeah, it's actually, speaking of sustainability, it's the way to go.
But not normally inside. You normally have it outside.
Oh, no, it is. It is. It's a.
I'll take your word for it then.
It's very popular here, actually. And in tiny house movement, I would say 90% of tiny houses have a manufactured composting toilet. It's not a bucket with sawdust. It's $1,000 toilet, more expensive than a chemical toilet by far. And it uses coconut coir, and you only have to dump it every couple months rather than every week like you do with a chemical toilet. And yeah, it's actually really nice.
What about family then? When you said you were going to do this, what did they think?
Well, my dad is very pragmatic, so he had some problems with it. I had gone to college and even grad school and worked towards a job that I had been working at for a few years, and he thought it was a mistake for me to quit that job and start an entirely new chapter and leave Los Angeles. But I think I've turned him around. I mean, he's definitely on my side now. So,
well done.
Yeah. But my mom's always been on board. She's sort of a hippie at heart.
I bet she loved it then. So tell me about you then now. So where are you on this journey? You've proved, you can live in the tiny house. You traveled around a bit. Maybe that's not what's happening now, but you've done very well with your YouTube channel in terms of creating all this content. So where is it going? Because I'm sure you feel you've probably told all the tiny house stories.
Amazingly enough, the channel just keeps growing and people want more and more and more. And I mean, I'll keep making them as long as people want them. But and I'm still interested in it, and I'm trying to branch off as well and make videos about other things such as travel and sustainable lifestyles. But for me, the next step is probably to find a more traditional home, but not a large one. So a small home that I can make into more of a permanent home that I can settle down in and have a family in. So that's probably the next step for me. And I'll be covering that, no doubt, on YouTube and finding ways to make space-saving furniture items in a home that's maybe 700 square feet that can fit quite a few people in it. So we'll see. That's the next step, though.
And at that stage, then, is it easy to find a good location to be? I'm assuming you're not on wheels anymore.
Right. And yeah, it's easier, but housing in the United States today is just getting larger and larger. So whenever I look, which I've only just started, for small houses, they don't really exist. So I feel like I'd have to build one, and I'd want to as well to make it, like I said earlier, personalized and the most efficient. And I'd want to put in new green practices into the home as well, solar and things like that. So that might be the next adventure for me and the next thing that I sort of cover. And I think it'll hit home, if you will, with more people, because not everyone's going to live in a tiny house, but some people might be interested in downsizing and minimizing a little bit and living in a small home, a home that's a third the size of the traditional home in the United States.
And then maybe finally, just on your YouTube channel again, what videos are you most proud of?
Well, my most popular video is actually about me talking about the downsides of living in a tiny house. And I wouldn't say I'm proud of that video necessarily.
Why did you make it?
Well, I was sort of feeling like I had done a lot of positivity, and I wanted to also be real. So I needed to talk about also the cons. I've talked a lot about the pros of living small. And so I wanted to also just tell people in my years of living small what I didn't like about it. And it's mostly just me talking to the camera, and I didn't expect it to get, I don't know how many it has now, over 5 million views, but it's gone really viral. But it didn't take a whole lot of creative filmmaking. It's just me being real on camera. So I'm proud of the views for that video. But if I was to say one or a video or type of video that I am proud of, it would probably be more of the videos about other people living small, because I find every person I meet that's in this movement is inspirational in some way. And I really just like to tell their story, how they decided to downsize, and the clever things that they're doing in their house to make it work. And I find those stories to be the most interesting and I'm most proud of.
Do you think there are traits of those sorts of people?
Yeah, definitely. I mean, you have to be open-minded for sure, because you're not going to be doing the typical American dream, and you have to be ready for some scrutiny, because people out there are going to think that you're strange because you don't want that big house and you don't want to buy into the materialistic lifestyle that is the norm. So I would say the commonality would be someone who's ready to live outside the box.
Well, Jenna, it's been lovely to catch up with you. Thank you so much for your time. And maybe chat again sometime if you're traveling around the world.
For sure. Thank you for having me.
Head online to take a look at the show notes for this one, houseplanninghelp.com/244. You can review the main information in our summary. We've got some photos as well. Well, it'd be rude not to, of Jenna's tiny home. If you have a comment or you'd like to ask a question, you can do that at the bottom of the show notes or on social media. And of course, we're going to link to that hugely successful YouTube channel, Jenna's website. Once again, houseplanninghelp.com/244. My call to action today is to check out the hub. Now, what is it? Well, we'll try and make it simple. Think of the Netflix for self-builders. So if you're about to tackle that house build project, well, we've got a load of digital resources to help you on your way. My background was in the media, so I just love making all of this content to try and simplify the journey, because it can get complex. So we have things like our in-depth video case studies where we follow complete builds, start to finish, and then we cut it up into chunks so that you can learn and see what's going on, because that's how you learn the most. You know, if you could just get out there and do anything, I'd say get out on site. That sometimes is not so practical. Maybe they don't want you there, or you can only do it once and then you're not back for another 6 months. So we make sure that we're there every week to 10 days and just capture what is going on so that you can understand that process before you have to go through it. We've got our conference calls. We bring on experts that either teach us something or help answer your questions. We've got the office hours. That's when you can get on a call with me and chat about your project. Our courses laying out the process of some particular element step by step. Our members forum too. This is a good area for accountability. We have something called a progress log where you can just keep track of your own project. Sometimes it can feel like you're not getting anywhere. Well, if you start one of these, it's great to see all of them. Everyone has moved forward in the process, even if they're not quite there yet. So if you want to find out more, head to houseplanninghelp.com/join. That's your lot for today. The House Planning Help podcast is produced by Regen Media, content that matters.